Okay, so at this point, you might want to, if you're working entirely within this right submission text box instead of Word or something like this, and of course your submission, it has to be submitted using the right submission text box no matter what, even if you copy and paste from Word. Um, I like to eliminate these extra icons so that I can have more room to see what I'm working with. All right, so now I'm going to help you with some tips for reformatting. What I do is I like to just copy the whole thing and then I paste it below. By the way, when you submit to me your, I don't like the way I did that. When you submit to me your response, I should only see one paragraph. Some people will submit a paragraph with just the labels and then a paragraph with just the excess verbiage crossed out. Don't do that. That's too much work for me to do. It clutters up the space. You need to do exactly as demonstrated. I should only see one paragraph version of your argument that you're working with. Okay, so let's see if I can make this happen without everything having a line through it. There we go. So that's the first thing I recommend. Then what you do is you start to move things around without deleting anything. So since I'm thinking this is my final conclusion, I'm going to go ahead and move it to last. And of course, we know that we have to reformat our argument when we're clarifying it. Okay, notice that it crossed it out. I'm not sure why it did that, but I'm going to uncross it out. Okay, or take the line out. Okay, so if something has a line through it, then it should not be in the reformatted version. I've already lectured on the consistency with work you do in the paragraph version of the argument, the ordinary argument, and the clarified reformatted argument. So I'm going to go ahead and delete this. So I am going to delete some things actually. I'm going to delete stuff that, I'm going to delete sentences and or statements that have been crossed out entirely. So this is a statement, crossed all of it out. These are sentences that are not statements. I crossed them out in their entirety, so I'm going to go ahead and delete those because they're not going to make an appearance as a sentence or a non-statement at all. Then I've got this premise. I'm going to leave it at the top, okay, because I know it's a premise and I know that, when I'm reformatting, the very first thing I should see is a premise, never a subconclusion, never a conclusion, never a final conclusion. So it's going to go somewhere up here. I might need to move this premise around, but we shall see. Then here we've got we should eulogize. So I'm thinking that's a premise. So I'll go ahead and separate like that. I think that's a premise. So as you'll remember from the lessons and all the examples we've worked through, we have to put each statement on its own line. And that's why it's so important to make sure you know how we're using the word statement, that you followed all the video lectures, you have all your examples and notes on, what a statement is. Oh, I just saw a word that I failed to draw a line through. And this might happen to you as well, and it's perfectly fine. You might realize that when you go to the next step of clarifying an argument, that you see you missed something. So I see here that I forgot to take out a conclusion indicator. So I'm going to go ahead and make sure that that's taken care of because I know my argument markup, my reformatting has to be consistent with my argument markup and vice versa. All right, so then I'm thinking this is a premise. I'm not going to worry about crossing this out because anything that's crossed out or has a line through it, eventually you delete it. So I'm not that worried about it. I know that's I think that's a subconclusion. I think this is a subconclusion. I'm not going to worry about moving these up here because I know no matter the argument, simple or complex, I would never have a subconclusion at the top of my reformat. Okay, so this is an easy way to start. Now, what I have some students do is they'll submit their reformat like this. And what this tells me is either they didn't follow the videos and copy all of the examples appropriately or look at their notes or they didn't do the lessons or they didn't follow this video all the way to the end because of course this is not acceptable at all. So now what we have to do is we have to make sure that we label and number the statements as taught in the previous lessons and examples and videos. Of course, we do not want bracket numbers, so brackets either. So right now, statement 3, for now, I'm going to call that premise 1. Okay, we have to get rid of the brackets. We have to follow writing mechanics. My sentence starts with a capital letter and has a period at the end. Okay, I'm going to get rid of that excess verbiage. Drew a line through it, don't want it in the final result. Notice that statement 4 is now going to become premise what? 2. Again, we're simply applying what I already taught you and explained. So we got rid of the opening bracket. Now we need to capitalize the W there. Get rid of the closing bracket. We already have a period. So just continue to follow me. That statement is now going to become premise 3. Get rid of that. We have to capitalize this. Now, remember during previous lectures, I said that when you're reformatting an argument, when handwriting, I don't want to see any words below the labels because it starts to look like you just are, writing in paragraph form again. When it comes to online, you may not be able to help that. So that will be the exception. Don't worry about trying to move this because depending on how big my screen is, the word might be at the end anyway. So I can just open up the screen fuller and then I'll see that, you do not have a word under there. So don't worry about that. Or you can just widen your screen. So, if you're working with if you're working with a really small screen, then it's going to look like the words under the label. But if you're working with a really wide screen, you can see what I'm going to see. So I will widen the screen. If it looks like you have a word underneath the label, I'll just widen it just like I did. And I'll see that you didn't, I'll see that you have this formatted correctly. So now statement 6. And remember, I wasn't sure about these, so I'm going to keep the question marks in for right now only, okay? So statement 6, I'm thinking might be premise 4. So that had a comma after the closing bracket. I need to just now put a period. Okay, so statement 7, that might become premise 5. So again, I take out the bracket and now I need a period. Statement 8, this might become premise 6. It already has a period. Okay, so remember, we drew a line through this up here, right? So I had just missed it. That's why I don't have it down here, but I went ahead and crossed it up, drew a line up there. So then I'm thinking statement 9 might be, nope, no number, right? Statement 9 is just a subconclusion. And what did I say in the lecture about conclusions and numbering? What did I have you add to your notes about subconclusions and numbering? So we think that's a subconclusion. Need to add a period. Get rid of that. Statement 10 is we think it might be another subconclusion. We know it's a subconclusion, but we know it's a conclusion. Maybe it's a final conclusion. So notice the changes that I'm making here. Now I get rid of not only the conclusion indicator, but what? The repeated conclusion that I think is the final conclusion. And then of course I have to get rid of the number here. Okay. So as you can see, I have revised this to the extent that I have isolated each statement and I have correctly identified each statement. Each statement is on its own line. Nevertheless, I'll still see students with comma splices here. Sometimes students still have sentence fragments because they haven't corrected them in the original argument. Sometimes students will have 2 statements that are joined by and here, and you shouldn't have 2 statements joined by and in a single line. That's what I was getting at. All right, so what you should do now is do the work that I've just done with your own argument that I did to this argument. Know that I still have to make final decisions about my labels. I still have to get rid of the question marks. It's not acceptable to keep question marks in your final response. I also still have to apply uniform language. But I would like for you to get this far before we continue to work on this argument and I give you more tips, warnings, and help when it comes to doing this online and other information.